The dog hit her headlights like something thrown from the dark, a low, heavy shape that cleared the tree line and folded onto the wet asphalt, with the kind of finality that made Piper Dunne's stomach drop before her foot found the brake. She recognized the silhouette before she stopped the truck. Belgian Malinois, military vest, and enough blood soaking the center line to tell her. She didn't have time to think about any of this carefully. Stopping to help was an act of compassion. What Piper didn't know, standing in the headlight wash of her rain-battered Tacoma on a dead stretch of Forest Service Road 25, was that it would also be the most dangerous decision of her life. Piper Dunne was 27 years old and 8 months into a 16-month posting at the Coldwater Ridge Research Station, a 2-building USDA wildlife research outpost buried 43 miles into the Gifford Pinchot National Forest in southern Washington. Her job was to track wolf reintroduction data and monitor ungulate populations, work that suited her preference for quiet and her general distrust of cities. The posting came with a satellite dish that buffered constantly, a propane cookstove, and cell service that held exactly 1 bar on clear days and nothing at all when the weather moved in off Mount Adams. The weather had been moving in for 3 days. She had driven into Randall that afternoon for propane and groceries and to pick up her nephew Jasper, who was spending the week while his mother recovered from knee surgery. Jasper was 8 years old and obsessed with anything that had 4 legs, been thrilled about the wolves. He was currently asleep in the passenger recline, his muddy sneakers pressed against the glove box, a half-eaten gas station granola bar balanced on his chest. It was 11:42 p.m. when the dog appeared. Piper stepped out into the rain with her flashlight without fully deciding to. The cold came down hard, the kind of Pacific Northwest November wet that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with saturation. She angled the beam toward the shape in the road. The dog was a female Belgian Malinois, compact and muscular under the dark tactical vest buckled to her frame. She was conscious, barely. Her amber eyes tracked the flashlight with an alertness that seemed to cost her something real. The vest was black nylon and reinforced Kevlar, stripped of any unit insignia, the Velcro patches cut clean. Only a stamped alphanumeric tag remained on the inner collar flap, K9C9, and beneath that stenciled in faded white, cipher. The wound was in her right flank, below the edge of the vest. A through-and-through, clean entry, catastrophic exit. Something high velocity had punched through her at close range and left the muscle around it torn and dark. Blood had pooled in the seams of the asphalt and was still running. Piper had been a vet tech for 5 years before taking the USDA position. She had worked trauma triage on wildlife rescues and large animal surgeries, and one memorable mountain lion that had taken a conservation officer's truck door clean off its hinges. She did not panic now. She knelt in the water beside the Malinois and pressed her palm flat against the wound site. And the dog let her. That was the first remarkable thing. A military working dog, trained for controlled aggression, shot and bleeding out on a logging road in the middle of the night, and she let a stranger put a hand on her. The dog held her gaze with those amber eyes and made a sound that wasn't quite a whimper and wasn't quite anything else. It was the sound of an animal making a decision about someone. "Okay," Piper said quietly. "Okay, I've got you." She got Cypher into the bed of the Tacoma with a moving blanket and a folded rain jacket pressed hard against the flank wound. Jasper did not wake up. The remaining 12 miles to Coldwater Ridge took 20 minutes of slow road, and Piper spent most of it running calculations in her head. Suture material, irrigation saline, antibiotics, the portable surgical lamp she kept in the equipment shed, what she had, what she needed, whether the dog would hold long enough for any of it to matter. She pulled past the main cabin without stopping and drove around to the equipment shed, a corrugated steel structure she used for gear storage and occasional necropsy work. Jasper stirred as she killed the engine. She told him she'd found a hurt animal, and that he should go straight inside and go back to sleep, and she handed him the cabin key and watched from the shed doorway until the light in his bedroom clicked on. Under the shed's overhead fluorescence, she unstrapped the tactical vest and laid it flat on the workbench. The gear was not surplus, not rental, ballistic plate inserts, a hydration bladder port, wiring channels that ran through the lining in a pattern she didn't recognize, and on the collar ring, a small module blinking a slow, deliberate red. A tracking transponder. She stared at it for 3 seconds. Then she picked up a cold chisel from the pegboard, positioned it against the module's casing, and hit it twice with a rubber mallet until the red light went permanently dark. She had no rational explanation for doing it. Some part of her brain had already assembled the picture from the available pieces, the stripped Velcro, the sterilized gear, the bullet that had been fired at a dog wearing a classified vest in the middle of a national forest at night. And whatever that picture showed, it did not show an accident. The surgery took just under 2 hours. She irrigated the wound, debrided the damaged tissue, placed a drain, and closed in layers using suture material from her field necropsy kit. Cypher lay on a folded horse blanket and allowed all of it, only flinching once, when Piper flushed the drain channel with saline. She followed each movement of Piper's hands with those amber eyes, not scared, not aggressive, attentive, like she was monitoring the procedure. When it was finished, Cypher turned her head and rested her muzzle on the back of Piper's wrist. It was such a quiet gesture, such a deliberate one. "You're all right," Piper told her, in the tone she'd used 1,000 times in exam rooms. "You're going to be all right." She dragged a camp chair next to the blanket, propped her rifle against the workbench, and sat down to wait. Outside, the November rain hammered the corrugated roof with the flat, indifferent consistency of white noise. It covered everything, every snapped twig, every shifted footstep, every sound that might have been moving through the Douglas firs. She was asleep by 2 in the morning. She woke to Cypher standing at the shed door. Not pacing, not whining. Standing, weight balanced evenly, ears pitched forward, the drain tube shifting slightly against her side. A sound was coming from deep in her chest. Not quite a growl, quieter and more deliberate than a growl, the kind of sound a trained dog makes when it wants to be heard by exactly one person. Piper grabbed the rifle before she was fully upright. Grey morning light was pressing through the high shed windows. The rain had stopped at some point while she slept. Through the gap under the door, the world outside was white with fog. She took her phone from her jacket pocket. No signal. She crossed to the satellite modem on the corner shelf. The router light was solid red. Storms knocked it out regularly, always had. She switched to her backup radio and scanned through 6 frequencies and got dead air on all of them. She walked back to the door and cracked it 2 inches and stood there listening. No birds, no wind, not even the sound of the creek that ran 50 yards behind the shed. That creek ran all winter, through freezes and droughts, through every storm the Cascades had ever thrown at this valley. She had fallen asleep to it every night for 8 months. She eased the door shut and went to the small side window, the one that faced the access road and the tree line beyond it. She wiped the condensation from the glass with her sleeve. The tree line looked like it always looked. Dark trunks, grey fog threading between them, the brown November undergrowth flat and still. Then one of the trunks moved. It resolved slowly. A figure in layered soft-shell camouflage, the kind designed to absorb rather than reflect light, emerging along the edge of the clearing in a direction that had nothing accidental about it. She shifted her gaze right and found another, then a third, materializing from behind the seasonal storage container near the road gate. They were moving in a loose wedge formation, each figure covering a quadrant, converging with a shared objective on the main cabin. Piper's mouth went dry. She had spent enough time in the field to know how to read animal movement, spacing, tempo, intent. These figures moved the way predators move when they are certain of their target and have already decided how it ends. Not one of them wore anything with a name or a badge or a flag. Jasper was in the cabin, asleep probably, or eating cereal at the kitchen table with his iPad propped against the sugar bowl. Something in her chest cleared out completely, the way a room clears when someone opens every window at once. The fear was still there, somewhere below everything else, but it had become irrelevant. She looked at Cypher. The Malinois looked back at her with those amber eyes, steady, present, waiting. "Stay close," Piper said. The shed had a secondary exit at the rear, a low door she'd used for hauling gear, and never once thought of as anything other than a convenience. It opened onto the drainage swale that ran between the equipment area and the fire break, a trench deep enough to crouch in, angled toward the back porch of the main cabin. 50 yards of mud and dead fern and fog. They went through low and fast. Cypher moved at her left hip with a controlled precision that had been built into her long before Piper ever existed. The drain tube swaying with each stride, the sutured flank tight, the pace absolutely steady. They were 2/3 of the way across the clearing when Cypher stopped. Hard stop, full freeze. 10 feet to their left, at the corner of the propane tank housing, a figure stood facing the access road with a suppressed rifle at low ready. He wore a radio harness across his chest and a combat blade on his left hip. Piper raised her rifle and held it. The figure started to turn. Cypher moved. She went flat and covered the distance in 2 bounds that made no sound on the wet ground. Her teeth connected with the man's forearm as he came around, clamping through the tactical sleeve and driving the rifle muzzle down into the mud. He made one short, compressed sound and shifted his weight trying to compensate, and Piper was already in motion, closing the distance and swinging the buttstock of her rifle into the side of his helmet with everything she had. The man dropped straight down and did not move. Cypher released and sat. She looked up at Piper. Piper unclipped the radio rig from the man's harness and turned the volume down to near 0 before the earpiece crackled. "Cypher 1, confirm your position. We are 30 seconds from primary breach." Primary breach, the cabin. She ran. The back porch door opened to the mudroom, and she was through it and into the kitchen before the adrenaline had finished arriving, throwing the bolt behind her and moving fast and low toward Jasper's room in the dark. He was awake, sitting up in bed, his iPad in his hands. He looked at her and at Kiefer behind her with the wary calibration of a kid who knows that adults don't come into rooms this way when everything is fine. "Hey," Piper said in a voice she had manufactured from nothing. "Quiet. Even. We're going to play a hiding game right now, okay? Come with me." She moved him to the bathroom at the center of the cabin, the one interior room with no windows. She wrapped him in a fleece blanket, put her phone in his hands. No signal, but the downloaded games still ran, and told him to put his headphones in and not open the door until she came back. "Is that dog going to stay with you?" he asked, looking at Cypher in the hallway. "She's going to help me with the satellite dish," Piper said. She pulled the door shut and held it until she heard the tinny audio of a game starting on the other side. Then she went back to the kitchen, turned off the one light she'd left on by accident, and pressed herself against the refrigerator in the dark with the rifle across her chest. The front door came in at the deadbolt, not with a ram, but with a specialized tool that fractured the frame in one clean motion. 2 figures swept the living room immediately, laser sights crossing the far wall in tight, deliberate arcs. They moved with the efficiency of people who had done this in rooms that were actually dangerous. A 3rd figure entered more slowly. He pulled the broken door shut behind him and moved to the center of the living room the way a man moves when he already knows where the threat is and has made his peace with it. "Messieurs Dunne." His voice was measured and formal. My name is Director Martin Ashby. I represent the Defense Intelligence Agency's Special Recovery Division. You're currently in possession of a classified government asset and an encrypted data module. I'm asking you to step out, lower the weapon, and let us do our job. This ends cleanly if you choose it." Piper said nothing. "The animal is not our primary concern," Ashby continued. "What's in the vest is." "Tell me what's in the vest," she said from behind the refrigerator. A pause. Classified DIA logistics architecture. The dog's handler sustained an injury last night during a training exercise. The animal panicked and fled. This is a recovery operation. From the hallway, Cypher made a sound, low and specific, the sound a dog makes when it hears a voice it knows from somewhere it would rather forget. "Your men jammed my cell service," Piper said. "You cut the satellite uplink. You sent 4 armed operators through my tree line at dawn. That's not how you recover a lost dog, Director." Silence. "Sergeant Dana Morse found what was on that drive," Piper said. She was working from inference and fragments and the sound Cypher had just made, and she was saying it with a steadiness she didn't entirely feel. "She tried to get it out, and you called what happened to her a training accident." The laser dots on the opposite wall did not move. "The vest is not in the shed," Ashby said. His voice had changed slightly, not louder but flatter. "My team swept it 40 minutes ago. So you're going to tell me where it actually is right now, or the next thing that happens in this room is not something I choose." Piper had no answer for that. She had left the vest on the workbench. She had not gone back to the shed after bringing Jasper inside. Someone had moved it, and it wasn't her. "Take her," Ashby said quietly. The sound that answered him did not start quietly. It came in all at once, a hard, rhythmic concussion that hit the cabin windows and vibrated the wall studs, rotor noise from multiple aircraft moving low and fast through the fog. High-intensity lights struck every window simultaneously and turned the living room into white. A megaphone voice cut through the rotor noise with the blunt authority of a statement rather than a request. "This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. All personnel inside and surrounding the structure will lower their weapons and step into the open with your hands visible. You are completely surrounded. Comply immediately." Ashby turned toward the door. He raised his sidearm toward the refrigerator as he turned, and Piper dropped below the handle line, and Cypher came out of the hallway at a dead run. She covered the distance in 2 strides and hit Ashby's upper arm from the left, her teeth clamping through his sleeve and her momentum driving his pistol sideways. The shot went into the ceiling. Ashby went down on his back, and Cypher stood over him with her teeth 6 inches from his throat, her whole body shaking from the effort of having crossed that room on a sutured flank. The 2 operators looked at the dog. They looked at Piper rising from behind the refrigerator, with the rifle leveled. They looked at the floodlights coming through every window, and the shadows of agents moving on the porch outside. Both of them placed their rifles on the floor. The front door opened less than a minute later. A woman in a dark navy windbreaker came in first. FBI in tall yellow letters across the chest. 4 more agents fanning behind her into positions that made it clear they had already thought through every corner of this room before they entered it. The woman looked at Cypher standing over Ashby. "Cypher," she said. Her voice was quiet and certain. "Stand down. You're done, girl. Stand down." Cypher's ears came up. She stepped back off Ashby's chest and sat. Then she turned and walked to Piper and pressed her head against her hip. "Mrs. Dunne." The woman lowered her credentials wallet. "I'm Special Agent Renata Ochoa, FBI Seattle Field Office. You and your nephew are safe." Piper set the rifle down on the counter. From the hallway, she heard the bathroom door open. Special Agent Ochoa explained it on the back porch, with the fog lifting in slow sheets off the tree line and the morning finally arriving somewhere above it. Piper sat on the steps. Cypher sat beside her. Jasper stood near the porch, railing, eating a protein bar someone from the staging truck had produced, watching the federal agents work with the fixed concentration of a child who has been told he is not in any trouble and is choosing to believe it. Martin Ashby had spent the better part of a year running an unauthorized intelligence channel, selling classified bioweapons research logistics to a foreign intelligence service operating through a private security cutout, facility locations, transport timelines, personnel assignments. The kind of infrastructure data that made a threat specific instead of theoretical. Sergeant Dana Morse, a DI signals analyst assigned to Cypher's unit, had identified the channel 7 weeks earlier. She had compiled the evidence onto an encrypted drive and concealed it in a purpose-built compartment sewn into Cypher's vest lining, using a technique designed for exactly this kind of internal extraction. She had then reported it up her chain of command, to the wrong person, as it turned out. Someone who passed the information directly to Ashby. What happened to Sergeant Morse was ruled a training accident before the paperwork was finished. Cypher had been with her that night. She had taken a high-velocity round in the flank, getting out of the staging area. She had run 3 miles through the National Forest in the rain before she reached Forest Service Road 25 and fell down in a stranger's headlights. The vest had been recovered by an FBI evidence team working from a drone feed. When the operator Piper had taken down in the drainage swales stopped transmitting, the team backtracked his encrypted radio signal to the equipment shed and found the vest on the workbench where Piper had left it. They knew immediately what they were looking at. When Piper had smashed the tracking transponder the night before, she had bought Cypher nearly 18 hours, during which Ashby could not pinpoint her exact coordinates. "You preserved the evidence," Ochoa said, "and you kept the dog alive." Piper looked at Cypher. The Malinois was watching the evidence team work near the tree line, tracking each figure with the professional attention of an animal that understood what that kind of work meant. "What happens to her now?" Piper asked. "Handler loss plus combat injury," Ochoa said. "Protocol is retirement." She looked out at the clearing, but retirement is only as good as the placement. She'll need someone with space, somewhere quiet, someone with the background to manage her recovery and the patience to understand what she's been through. She looked at Piper without any pretense of subtlety. "Know anyone like that?" Cypher turned and looked at Piper. Not the way she had looked at the agents. The way she had looked at her on the road the night before, in the rain on the yellow center line, making a decision that she apparently had not reconsidered since. "Jasper," Piper said. Her nephew appeared from behind the staging truck, still holding the protein bar. "What do we call her?" Piper asked. He regarded the dog for a long moment, with the gravity of a task that required getting right. "Cass," he said finally, "like the start of Cassiopeia, because she knows how to find her way." Cypher Cass stepped forward and put her nose into his open palm. The fog had pulled back to the ridgeline. Below the clearing, the creek that had been silent all morning was running again over its rocks, moving south toward the river the way it had been doing since long before any of this happened, the way it would keep doing long after the federal vehicles had gone back down the access road and the broken front door had been replaced and the equipment shed had been cleaned and the horse blanket had been washed and folded and put away. It was the sound of the woods being ordinary. It was the sound of the night being finished. Piper sat on the porch step in the thin November light, and Cass settled in beside her, and Jaspers leaned his weight against both of them and asked if they had anything for breakfast besides protein bars, and for a little while none of them went anywhere at all.